Hello and welcome to another Cricket World Cup wrap here on the Top Order podcast. Overnight, Afghanistan and South Africa completed the group league stage of the Cricket World Cup, with South Africa wrapping up a pretty comfortable victory in the end over Afghanistan to end their tournament. We'll break that down, all of that and more, and look forward to tonight's games between Australia and Bangladesh and England and Pakistan with Raj and Baldy. All that and more coming up on the Top Order podcast Cricket World Cup Daily Wrap Show. That one. Morning, Raj. How you doing?
Good morning.
Welcome back.
I'm good. Thank you. I'm good. I'm feeling very bleary-eyed this morning, but excited to get into it.
Me too. South Africa, again, wrapping up another comfortable victory against Afghanistan, this time chasing down 244 for victory in the 48th over, which looks like a pretty comfortable chase. And I think it was really, in the end, South Africa pretty much in control all the way through that innings, with a couple of hiccups along the way. Afghanistan obviously finished their tournament now with 4 wins, 5 losses, and we'll get into some of the talking points there. But what did you take away from the match overnight?
Yeah, look, it's. I think we're probably going to focus a little bit more on South Africa than than Afghanistan. But Afghanistan's had a great tournament, and we should really wrap up something with them later on this podcast. But I think South Africa will be happy with their performance. They will be a little disappointed in the first innings, letting Afghanistan get out to 244. A great innings there from Azmat. A little rearguard action with Rashid Khan and Noor Ahmed batting with them in 2 solid partnerships to close out the innings. But ultimately, I think it was just a little light. It felt a little light. The pitch actually looked like a good pitch to bat on. I saw most of that first innings last night as well. But yeah, ultimately a good performance. They were able to chase it down easily. A great opening partnership with Kagiso Rabada, with Quinton de Kock and Temba Bavuma. Bavuma will be disappointed with how he got out. And then Rusty van der Dussen cleaning up towards the end, a good 76 not out. Patient, batted the innings, batted in partnerships, and got the job done ultimately for South Africa.
Well, and that's it for today's Top Order podcast, Cricket World Cup wrap. Raj has summed it up perfectly. But I think you have. I think we do need to give credit to Azmat. I mean, he was within a whisker of one shot, really, of bringing up the second consecutive 100, and would have been the second 100 for Afghanistan batters at World Cups. And their batters generally have been really good in this tournament. I think, we talked a lot about Gurbaz, we talked a lot about Ibrahim, their openers, having to do the bulk of the work. But they have had contributions from their middle order throughout this World Cup, just not all at the same time. And we know that Rashid can give us some helicopter towards the back end of the innings, and Afghanistan put up a tricky chase if South Africa lost early wickets. But as you say, they kept their order together. I think for South Africa, they'll be pretty pleased with the fact that they got 4 wickets out of Gerald Coetzee. He came into the game alongside Andile Philogweo, and both of those guys performed with ball and bat respectively. So I think for South Africa, a head out for those guys ahead of the semi-final against Australia is a good thing for them if an injury comes up. And we'll talk about the injury to Temba Bavuma in just a second. But I think from a bowling perspective for South Africa, it was just a tune-up game for them, really. They couldn't finish any lower than a semi-final against Australia. They had a point to prove, I think, in terms of deciding that they wanted to chase instead of bat first. So there were a lot of boxes for them to tick, and I think they ticked most of them off pretty comfortably in this game. You have a look at their chase, 247 for 5. There's contributions all around the kind of anchor role for Rusty van der Dussen. And we say anchor role, he still struck at 80, but 76 off 95, and guys sort of contributing around him. And then, as we said, Andile Philogweo, 39 not out off 37, brought it home. So there's lots to like about that South African performance. But for me, the talking point is, Afghanistan were only really 1 wicket away here. 4 for 140, the game was really on. David Miller gets out at 5 for 180. And, if Afghanistan could have wrangled out 1 more wicket, Rusty van der Dussen in particular, there was a real game on here. But South Africa did a good job, I think, of making sure that we avoided the dreaded C word and built some vaunted M word, your favourite word, Raj, building into that semi-final against Australia.
Yeah, and you're right, because of the balance they had in their lineup, adding Philogweo, they did have a little bit more depth than they may have had previously if they played an extra spinner. But there was a little chink in that chase, and you mentioned it. It was that day when David Millard out. It did expose Sri Lanka. Sorry, it did expose South Africa to losing another wicket and being in some real trouble. David Miller, I saw a lot of his batting. I went back and saw a little bit of it this morning. He looked a little tentative, and the way he got dismissed was just a little pushback to the bowler. I think he'll be disappointed, but that's not the David Miller that we need to see. That's not the David Miller that South Africa need. They need a David Miller that is very, very. I've just got a message there. He's very. They need a David Miller that is inhibited. Is that the right word?
Uninhibited, even.
Uninhibited. They need a David Miller that is batting uninhibited. At the moment, in that chase, he wasn't doing that.
Yeah, I think, generally speaking, South Africa are a better setting side because they can bat with an uninhibited kind of view. There are sides that are better at chasing. I think New Zealand's one of them.
Can I just ask a question quickly on Gerald Coetzee? I actually saw a lot of his bowling last night. I thought he was incredible. He bowled great areas, and he's actually bowling some real red ball areas that I think will be good in red ball cricket. He's actually got a good start to his career. What do you make of Coetzee and his bowling? He's kind of snuck up on us a little bit. There's bigger names in that South African lineup. We've been talking about the spinners as well, but Coetzee has really actually bowled well for in this tournament. It's been one of my finds.
Yeah, he's bowled pretty well, hasn't he? And if he is bowling those good red ball areas, I think it's one of those bowlers that can really challenge Australia in a semi-final. I think Warner and Head are susceptible to nicking off early doors if you get the ball in the right areas. We saw it in Australia's last pool game. Both Head and Warner were dismissed early. Head's ball that he nicked off to was outstanding. So I think if South Africa can get the ball in the right areas against Australia, particularly on a hard length, it can make it quite difficult for Australia to get away. What I think they do need to do is make sure they don't bowl any width to either of those two batters. So there's a bit of a formula there for South Africa, but it's good to see there's some depth emerging in their bowling. They've used Lundy Ngidi, they've used Rabada, they've used Marco Jansen. I think it would have been good for Jansen to have a hit out against Afghanistan leading into the semi-final. He didn't have a great last outing. There's been a lot spoken in the media about his mental state, the noise around his performance. He admitted that he was very nervous going into the last game. So, I would have liked maybe to have seen Marco Jansen in this last hit out, maybe instead of one of the bigger names, Rabada or Ngidi or any of those guys, to give him a little bit of confidence going into the semi-final. But as an Australian fan, I'll take it. Any weakness that the Australian team can exploit, I'm sure they'll try and do so. But yeah, Gerald Coetzee has been a bit of a find in this tournament, Raj. And if you've got him in your book, then that's awesome. He's only 23, 24, played a couple of test matches. He's played 13 ODIs now. Average is only 23. So, he's got a good average with the ball. His strike rate's only 21. He's already got 2 forfers. So, he's got a promising career ahead of him, and he bowls pretty good wheels as well.
You also mentioned Temba Bavuma's injury. He has played through this hamstring injury, which he has got, battered through it. There's a great headline here saying, "I'll have to be fine," as a quote from Temba Bavuma. What do you make of him and his injury, playing through it? There has been a lot of negative reaction to it.
Yeah, there seems to be quite a lot of negative reaction, as in why would he play through the injury? I guess he probably wanted to have a bat and as a tune-up for the potential semi-final. He did get to 23 off 28 before he was caught. I don't really know. I wonder if he sort of assessed it as, look, I've tweaked it. It's not serious. I don't think I'm going to make it any worse by playing. But he certainly was pretty ginger getting around the field. He didn't go off for very long. And I think that's probably because he wanted to have a bat in the chase. It wasn't like, I don't think, South Africa were ever in real danger of needing him in that chase. But, his contribution at the top of the order with Quinton de Kock was important. And it may just be that he just doesn't want to miss out. If he gets some time off and Reza Hendricks comes in and does a good job, as he did when Bavuma was down with illness for a couple of games, he might not see a spot in the final should South Africa make it through. So it's a very competitive South African side at the moment. What were your thoughts on that injury? Did it look bad in the field? He looked a bit ginger there at a couple of points.
He looked a bit ginger, but he looked like he had he was able to play through it. And ultimately, you have to trust a professional athlete to judge themselves and their bodies and let them do what they believe they can in that situation. So I fully back him. Whatever he wants to do, I am behind him.
I do like his quote too. I have to be right.
Yeah, to be right.
I like it.
We will, I guess, sum up, when we talk in the review show about all the teams, and we'll save a special place for Afghanistan. But with victories against England, Pakistan, Sri Lanka, and Netherlands, their campaign has come to an end. Just some quick summary thoughts around their performance at this World Cup.
Far and away exceeding expectations. You have to give them, on the cricket field, you have to give them an A, really, in terms of their performance. I don't think anybody really expected Afghanistan, other than maybe the Afghanistan squad themselves, to beat any of those sides that you mentioned, other than maybe the Netherlands. I don't think anyone really gave them any realistic expectation of winning maybe more than 1 or 2 games in this World Cup. They've won 4. They'll finish on, potentially, depending on how games go tonight, on the same number of wins as England and Sri Lanka combined, both former World Cup winning countries. England won the last World Cup, just.
Did they?
So, you like that? You like what I did there? So, they've performed outstandingly well. They've unearthed some great young batters. We've got what we expected to see from their experienced spinners in Nabi Khan, Noor Ahmad. I'm glad they played him. I'm glad that he got some game time. So look, things are looking up for men's cricket in Afghanistan, and if we can get their women's side more involved in the game, I know a lot of them are playing sort of grade cricket in Australia, but that's the way forward, I think, for Afghanistan as a nation, is to get their women's side more involved as well. Hopefully, if we can navigate our way through those murky waters. But just focusing on the men's side, they've been way above expectation in this tournament, and I think they should hold their heads up high because they've exceeded just about everyone's expectations.
Yeah, and I think that, you mentioned some big names there, the Rashid Khans, Noor Ahmed, Mujib, Naveen. These are Nabi. These are names that we know, we've heard of. They're all on one side of the ball. They're bowlers who can bat a little bit. It was really good to see the emergence of some real decent artillery with their batting. That innings overnight by Azmat, and I saw pretty much all of the innings of Zadran in their previous match, the 100 he scored. They were great hundreds. They were hundreds that they would score against any opposition, and I'm happy to see that they're becoming a more well-rounded side. And they're going to cause, they've made the Champions League now, they're going to cause some upsets going in, and there'll be a point in time where we change it from, they're not really the outsiders, they are probably, they might not be the favourites, but they can beat anyone on their day. If they turn up, you've got to be awake to the possibility that they could beat you.
100%, and we've seen that now. We're there at that point now. That you have to prepare well against Afghanistan. You know what you're going to get. They're not going to surprise you with something that you're not going to be prepared for. They're going to bowl well in the spin. Their top 5 are going to bat well. So you're not going to get too many surprises there. But they are. I have to say, they surprised me with just how professional they were on the cricket field. And I don't mean that as in a condescending, well done to the emerging nation, they've got a professional cricket unit. They were professional by comparison to some of those sides that they beat. They were more professional in the way that they played the game than England were. They were more professional in the way that they played the game than Sri Lanka were. They out-proed those sides on the day, which is a big compliment that I can pay to Afghanistan cricket, because they went about their game in a very measured, very calm, very professional manner, and they knew what they had to do and they executed their plans well. So, I think some of that has to come down to Jonathan Trott and his coaching staff preparing them well for games, but they looked like a really polished cricket side.
Okay, so I 100% agree with that, and it's going to be a good review show, I think, when we talk about them. There's
Absolutely.
2 things I want to talk about just to round out the show. I've got two things to talk about. First question for you is, we've drawn a semi-final similar to the 1999 World Cup final, South Africa versus Australia. That was an absolute nail-biter. How are you feeling in this round? How is this going to go down for you? Are you going to be nervous going in? Are you going to get some sleep, or are you going to try and stay up? Tell us all about how you're going to deal with this fixture.
I am nervous, to be honest, because this is a little bit of a different South African side than we saw in 1999. South Africa were probably the best side in the tournament in 1999 up until that semi-final. They were strong favourites to win. They're probably favourites again in this game against Australia, to be fair. But I think South Africa this time around are a little bit more prepared for that mental battle. You saw some evidence of that last night in the Afghanistan game. South Africa won the toss. They decided that they wanted to chase, and they wanted to do so because they needed practice at chasing. They needed to be prepared for that situation if in the context of a semi-final or a final they were asked to do so. So they're preparing themselves for contingencies that I don't think maybe the South African side of 1999 prepared for themselves as well as this 2023 edition of South Africa. They've got firepower up and down the park, South Africa, in this 2023 edition of the World Cup. I think their batting unit is as good as India's, sort of 1 through 6. Their bowling unit is very, very good, particularly if Marco Jansen performs to the level that we have seen from him. So as an Australian fan, and I'll put my Australian fan hat on here, I am nervous for Australia. I think Australia have almost as good a batting lineup as South Africa, but it's not quite as explosive, Maxwell notwithstanding. Australia needs some contributions out of guys that haven't really stepped up in this tournament yet as much. If you have a look at the comparison between, say, the wicketkeepers, de Kock versus Inglis, they've got massive contributions from Quinton de Kock, not so much from Josh Inglis. Haven't got much from Stoinis as compared to David Miller, for example. But there are match winners in that Australian lineup up and down the order. Maxwell, obviously, we know is one of those. So I think both sides will be a little bit wary of each other. And I think what will be telling is which team comes out and plays, as you said earlier, Raj, in an uninhibited fashion. Which team is prepared to throw off the shackles, the nerves, put aside the noise, and really get down to playing the cricket that they can play at their best. And I think the team that does that the earliest in the game will start to wrestle a bit of momentum away from the other team. And I think that could be a deciding factor for Australia or South Africa in that semi-final.
Yeah, and yes, thanks for highlighting when I used the word inhibited rather than uninhibited.
No, but you're 100% right.
But that, yes,
you're 100% right.
It was a great segue because it leads me to why I got that mixed up, and we got a point slipped into our run sheet just as we were talking there, and that is about the Sri Lanka being suspended by the ICC. So this is a little bit of a developing story which we'll pick up over the next little while, but it is to do with the intervention from the political intervention in Sri Lanka with the Sri Lankan minister there. We've seen it before with the likes of Zimbabwe and things like this. There is no current punishment or recourse around what that means, how they've been suspended, but all we know is that there will be some repercussions, maybe some, they'll need to demonstrate how they are going to, fix their selection policies going through, how they're going to keep the politics out of it, which I like. I think that's something that that's important for the game. You mentioned Afghanistan there as well. But yeah, more to come on that story, but that's something I just wanted to slip in there because it is an important story.
Breaking news on the Top Order podcast. Thank you for breaking that, Raj. Yeah, look, Sri Lanka have had challenges with the political intervention in their cricket for a long, long time now. That country is obviously going through both political and economic upheaval. They tried to sack their board and reinstate it with another board. I believe that move has been rejected. So there's some turmoil going on both in that country and in cricket in that country. And for the benefit and the moving forward of international cricket, we hope that can be sorted out quickly. But yeah, a big move from the ICC to potentially suspend Sri Lanka until that is resolved, because I don't think that's a quick fix for Sri Lankan cricket. So huge news. Thanks for breaking it, Raj. Tonight we've got a double header just before we drop off the pod and finish the day in this daily wrap. Australia play Bangladesh tonight, and an interesting game, England-Pakistan tonight. Champions Trophy, potentially qualification on the line for both Bangladesh and England, depending on net run rate. So lots to play for those sides. Potentially World Cup final qualification is on offer for Pakistan. They need to beat England batting first by more than 287 runs to sneak ahead of New Zealand. So tall orders for Pakistan tonight. to beat England by a healthy margin, almost a record margin, if they were to qualify for the semi-finals. Any sort of summary comments on either of those two matchups, things you're expecting, Raj, before we finish the pod? I know it's quite easy to gloss over some of these fixtures in the back end of the tournament that don't have direct bearing on semi-final qualifications.
Yeah, look, I will be watching both games. I'll be paying more attention, I think, to the England-Pakistan game, or at least to the beginning of it, depending on who's batting first or bowling first. But it is interesting to have fixtures where there are implications, especially for one side. Like, a lot of times when you get to this stage of the tournament, they're going through the motions, the top four is sorted, but the Champions League qualification has added an extra layer of complexity or interest. Maybe interest is a better word to use. Those top seven, they're qualifying for the Champions Trophy, and yeah, it's going to be a battle, and I am looking forward to seeing the results of those games. But really, for me, it's England versus Pakistan. I hope England do the job for us as Kiwis, it's going to be a good game.
Yeah. New Zealand fans will be glued to the toss at Eden Gardens. Coming up trumps, and England batting first means that New Zealand will automatically qualify. If Pakistan win the toss and bat first, then they remain alive in the tournament for then. And then a couple of nervous hours for New Zealand fans to see what kind of total Pakistan post. Anything less than 287, and New Zealand are automatically through to the World Cup semi-finals. Thank you, Raj, for your time on the Top Order podcast this morning. Always enjoyable chatting cricket with you. We'll be back again tomorrow on the Top Order podcast for yet another wrap of this Cricket World Cup on a daily basis, covering off that Australia-Bangladesh and England-Pakistan game, and then looking forward to the last fixture of the tournament, which will be India and the Netherlands, which will round out the group stage, and then onwards and upwards towards the semi-finals. Raj, it was great to talk to you this morning, and thank you, listeners and viewers, for joining the both of us on the Top Order podcast. We'll see you again tomorrow.